Welcome everybody. My name is Zahra Indigo, and I am here with you today to share about the alchemy of ancient Egypt. And let me go ahead and do a screen share so that instead of seeing me so much, you can see Egypt. So, welcome. Here is Giza Plateau from kind of the backside looking out towards Giza and Cairo. Tonight where I am anyway, and whatever time of day it is for you, I'm going to talk a little bit about Egypt and why Egypt and why I have this relationship and what I do there. I'm going to share some images just to give you a sense of the modern Egypt. What does modern Egypt look like, right? And then we'll get into learning a little bit about the Neteru, and I'll explain what that is when we get there. And we'll have a short guided journey at the end of this. And then if there's any questions or thoughts, I'll make some time at the end. And if there's something that comes up in between, you're always welcome to raise your hand and I'll get to you. So that's the goal for our hour and a half today. So Egypt and I was first introduced to Egypt when I was a child, like so many of us, right? This mythic land of Egypt that is, oh, so far away. And in 2012, I had the opportunity to go with one of my teachers, Nikki Scully. And my experience there was nothing short of miraculous. Its ability to transform, right? That I went into this experience one person and came out of it someone else, right? Better, someone better. And it kept drawing me back again and again. So what initially was joining Nikki to help her out on a tour in that 2012 year turned into a passion of mine. And since that time, I've led, I think, 17 tours and hundreds of people through the land and through the mysteries of Egypt. And in that time, look at me, I found a typo, I'm gonna fix it. In that time, I initially worked under Nikki's company, Shamanic Journeys, and then in 2018 founded my own company, Mysteries of Egypt. And so now I'm continuing the work that she began, which is an amazing story about how she came to Egypt and what that's all about. And perhaps some other time I'll share that, or you can find out about that from Googling her. And so 30 years of travel to Egypt, Nikki did, and 60 plus tours and thousands of pilgrims. And she taught me and trained me and gave me the connections. And out of that came Mysteries of Egypt. Also, what came out of that is the Zahra Handworks Foundation. And what that is a very small, sweet thing where we teach the women over there how to do handwork. And we focused on crochet, mostly crochet, and teaching them how to cut a plastic bag, because in Egypt, the single-use plastic bag is kind of a big problem. So sharing with them that this is a beneficial resource and with lots of colors, and you can be very creative with it, teaching them how to crochet. And then that morphed into providing looms for women to weave. And so we've installed 3 looms at this point, and we've located the next woman who will be receiving a loom. And so that was supposed to happen this year, but we've been in this very strange year of 2020. So I'm hoping that we can get this loom to Hadia, is her name, in this next year cycle. So my work there has kind of branched out, not only the tours, but also working with the people on the ground, being with the women and learning this really beautiful truth that you don't need a common language when you do handwork together. The handwork is the language, and sitting in a room of women, of Egyptian women in an oasis deep, deep in the desert, with no language shared except for that of our hands. It's a pretty miraculous experience. So that's Egypt and I. And through all of that experience that I've had there, I've learned about the gods and goddesses of Egypt and their archetypal significance. So my master's degree is in eco-psychology, which is looking at the union of the psyche and spirit, however that is for you, and ecology, the ecology of the body, the ecology of our ecosystem, et cetera. And when all those three are in balance, then you have a healthy human, a healthy system. And we don't have that so much right now. And when I was studying my master's degree, I really began to recognize how these ancient Neteru, the gods and goddesses of Egypt, are really reflections and aspects of our own psyche. And when we learn to work with those archetypes, um, amazing wisdom comes forth. So I'm looking forward to sharing a little bit of that today. You know, as long as the Nile has been flowing, people have been traveling and dreaming and working with Egypt in one way or another. So today is just, we're barely dipping our toes into this river of what Egypt is and what the Nile is and what the ancient peoples are and what the modern peoples are. So with that, um, let's just absorb some images of what modern Egypt looks like today. And as you look at these images, you're going to notice that they're kind of timeless. You know, is this last year or is this 100 years ago? Is this 300? Is this 5,000? When was this photo, right? It could have been at any point, at any time in Egypt's history. And the gods and goddesses of Egypt, as you'll see as we move through this, and from maybe your own experience working with them, are reflections of nature. And many of them come from the natural scenery around them. Hathor, the cow, you know, Thoth is the ibis, Sekhmet is the lioness, etc. This is amazing. So I'd been down the Nile lots of times on the boat, and we have a private boat called a dahabeah for 3 to 5 nights, depending on our tours. And seen a lot of birds on the Nile, and I'm seeing this pink, and I'm rubbing my eyes. I mean, what is that pink color I'm seeing against the blue of the water? And sure enough, it was flamingos. I'd never seen flamingos in Egypt, and there they were. So, and there they are, right? The Neteru all hanging out, all the reflections of nature, right? The river's a reflection of nature, the birds, the plants, all of it. And just this sense of the green and the water, little narrow strip of that beautiful water providing life to this desert, right? And you can see new buildings there, you can see older buildings crumbling, and throughout Egypt, you see this rising and falling of humanity and what we do. Again, this timeless sense, even the buildings in the back, that they're made with brick, but the way they're built was how they were built forever, right? This very simple construction, the date palms is part of their culture and their livelihood. The mist rolling in the mornings before the sun is high. This is in Aswan. So this particular photo is between the high dam and the old dam. The old dam was built in the early 1900s, and the high dam was completed in 1970. So really, I was born in 1971. And my generation from that point forward was the first generation to not really experience the flooding of the Nile. And what has happened without that flood, right? That essential aspect of the natural cycle of things. It's brought a lot of benefit. There's truth in that, but it's also brought a lot of detriment as well. So this photo is standing on the island of Philae, looking just out to, this is the Nubian islands, and off in the distance here is a Nubian village. Just the sense of the stones, right? You can feel the eons of water rushing, like raising and lowering as it passed through this area, these cataracts that are in Aswan. And then just south of here, just south of the high dam is the lake. And Lake Nasser goes all the way down to the border of Egypt and Sudan. And here is again in Aswan. And what I want to share about this is, you know, here's modern day Aswan. You've got some motorboats here, you've got some sailboats. But what we're looking at is at an island called Elephantine. And one of the amazing things about this island is it has like 27 layers of time, right? So when there's a holy spot and a temple is built on that spot, right? It lives there, and that ground is consecrated, and then a new people come in and they put their holy place on top, and then the new holy place and the new holy place and the new holy place, right? And so this island holds like I think it's 23 layers of humanity building on top of itself, temple upon temple, sacred upon sacred. This is also a place where there was a very large Jewish community at one point in the history. And they say that the Ark of the Covenant stood here, stayed here for a period of time on its way south. So it's got interesting history, not just from the ancient times, but in the more recent ancient times. Uh, it's a beautiful place. Aswan is like peace. When you're in Aswan, there's this outbreath, this sinking in and relaxing that I've not felt anywhere else in the world. Um, People of today, this is Soad on the left, and Zuba here on the right, and this is one of the looms that our foundation has provided to them. Zuba lives in a little oasis out in the middle of Cairo, and Soad, she is a dear heart friend who has helped with the foundation in Egypt in so many ways that I can't even begin to express how much gratitude. So anyway, a little piece of the oasis. And then a very traditional home, right? Just simple, right? They don't have a lot of belongings. Our Western world has a lot of things, right? I'm a collector. I've got things. I like books. I have trinkets. I have statuary. I collect things, and they really they have the simplicity of life, and that color, right? They bring in this color that's just quite amazing. This is an image that I wanted to share of modern Egypt because it's showing an ancient way of building. You see the mud brick here, but they would also use these clay pots and build with the clay pots, right? By putting a pot on top of a pot and then packing the mud around that. So, and then when it would start to crumble, they just build more in, right? Super sustainable. And then when that crumbled down, they just pack it down because it's just dirt and build on top of that, right? Top and top and top, layer upon layer. So um, pretty amazing. And then moving from that into more kind of modern and traditional both. Here we have this gentleman with his donkey and his cart, but with modern wheels, and it's probably like a car trainee underneath there supporting the whole thing. And everywhere you go, you see people selling their vegetables on the side. There's not big supermarkets the way there is in the West. And it's just so beautiful to see how close the people are with the growing earth there in so many ways, in many of the places. And then just a contrast, right? A contrast of the chaos, the busyness, and the open desert that goes on and on and on and on. And from villages and a simple life to this really busy Cairo, 20 million people and maybe 40 million cars. I'm kidding, there's not that many cars, but you might think so when you're moving through the city. There's so many cars. Um, I live in the state of Oregon, and we have a million people, a few million people. And so in like a small, like in this area we're looking at right here, there's more humanity than in the entire state I live in, which is pretty amazing, right? That there are so many people. And that sky is true to that day. Sometimes it's really bad air because of the pollution of the cars. Sometimes it's because of the hamsins, which is when the sands get whipped up and the dust comes through from the deserts. So I think this particular day was a hamsin day, but it's a dusty city, an amazing city, but a bit of a dusty city. And then the people of Egypt today are about 90% Muslim, and the landscape is dotted with beautiful minarets and mosques throughout the cities and countryside. And at the call to prayer time, which has to do with the rotation of the sun, you'll hear the call to prayer just echo across wherever you are in Egypt. It comes forth. And then just one more beautiful image of what is sacred to them today in today's world. This is the Hussein Mosque in downtown Cairo near the Kano Khalili Bazaar. And these umbrellas, they actually open and then close again when to come down to when they don't need the shade. So, so that's just a really fast overview of ancient Egypt or of modern Egypt and how it feels. And as you're sinking into how those photos were feeling, know that, you know, when you get out of Cairo and you get more into this and this and this is Egypt. This is timeless Egypt, right? No matter when it was, no matter when it was. So now let's talk a little bit about ancient Egypt. Again, there is so much here, and there's so much study, and so many people that have looked into this and taken their own, you know, take on what these different things mean, and you know, the time frames and all of this. You know, some will say the Sphinx is, you know, 5,000 years, and others will say it's like 30,000 years, right? So where do we land with that? I don't know the answers to the mysteries, and that's why they're the mysteries, but I know that they speak to us. And I know that when we enter into the mysteries with open hearts and pure curiosity in our minds and a willingness to step outside of what we already know, amazing wisdom comes forward. And sometimes, you know, they give instruction and we get messages that are life-changing and challenging, and sometimes it's just sweetness, right? But regardless, they've never led me wrong. And so the Neteru. The Neteru, this word is the word for the gods and goddesses of Egypt. And so one netter, a singular would be a netter, and many of them are the Neteru, right? So when we're talking about the whole of the pantheon, it's the Neteru. If I'm talking about Isis, talking about a single netter. Their hieroglyph is a flag. Whoops, sorry about that. And you'll see here in this image, there's two flags with the Ankh in between, right? And so it's saying essentially that this life that the Ankh represents is sacred. It's held by the gods, right? Life is sacred. It's holy. The Neteru, as I kind of mentioned earlier, are for the most part aspects of nature, right? They're representations of the natural world that the ancient peoples recognized as sacred and also recognized as aspects of themselves. And so in that recognition, they began to pull the mythos into these archetypal stories that allowed for learning in themselves, allowed for understanding of themselves. And so we'll learn a little bit about some of the gods and goddesses, some of the more known ones. We'll talk about them a bit and give you just a really beginning understanding of what they represent um, and what they can do to help us. I love this. So the word Neteru, long time, you know, time. The Coptic Christian people are some of the original, you know, their sect of the Christian religion has been in Egypt since the beginning, right? Since the very beginning. And they have their own language, and their word for God is Necher. So Neteru over time morphs into Necher. And then nature, this word nature, over time, right, it morphs into nature. And nature then brings it right back around again to the Neteru, who are the gods and goddesses, these nature god and goddesses. Um, and I just love that when you're in the Coptic churches today and you listen, you're hearing the prayers that they're giving, you'll hear them say nature, nature, and you'll know that that's what they're saying. They're saying God in that moment. Few different images of the flags. So up on the top right here, this is in a temple called Colombo, which is a hospital. It was a holy medicine place where people would go to be healed. And there's places on the walls where they have surgical instruments and all sorts of amazing things. And I love this because here's some mushrooms surrounded by the gods, right? So the sacred mushroom medicine was holy. It was holy. It was held by the gods. The one on the top right, here you have one netter. And this symbol here, the square with the little window, that's a hieroglyph for house. So this is saying this is the house of the netter. This is like the temple, the house of God. And just multiple netter, right? Many of them together. This one in the middle here has this spiral is like breath, right? And then the feather represents the goddess Ma'at, who we're going to meet in just a minute. And so what this is telling me is that the truth of our breath is holy, right? When we breathe in a sacred way, when we're focused on our breath, we find that truth. And then this one, I just found this. I didn't even know I had taken this picture. And when I was working on the slideshow, I found it and I love it. It maybe is one of my favorite netter pictures of all, because what it's showing us here is the land. Here's the land, right? And here's the flag announcing this is where the temple is. It's like at the marking point, and here's the temple itself, right? So and then this one is like three netter in a boat being carried forward. So the Neteru, the gods and goddesses of Egypt. Not all the Neteru are direct nature deities. Some of them are conceptual. So the first three we're going to just meet today are Sia, Hu, and Heka. The picture here is of Heka, and I'll talk about him in just a sec. But Sia, what Sia represents is the mind and perception, inspiration, vision, right? Hu represents expression, right? So you have, I have an idea, and now I need to talk to you about it. I need to express it. I need to share it, or I need to write it. I need to bring it into some kind of form. So I perceive it, I see it, I dream it, I vision it, and then I bring it into form. And then Heka is the god of magic. And so Heka is the manifestation point that lights up that vision into expression. So then it can become actualization, right? It can come into form. And I actually, these three I've just begun to work with because I realize that like the principles that they represent, I can spin into everything I do, right? Okay, we're going into a project. Let's take the time to breathe, right? Because Hu is also that breath. So that breath to be able to have the vision, to bring the vision back into the expression, and then allow for that magic to light it up and bring it forth. And so that's a way that you call them forward, right? In your work is to lean into these principles, knowing that they have strength behind them. So these images are, let's see, in the top right here, this second serpent over is a serpent who is Sia. Hu, and Hu's symbol is like a tongue. There's this long tongue-like symbol here, and that's his symbol. And you can see over here he is in the boat and he has that same symbol on his tongue for like the word, right? He's expression, and so the tongue is his symbol. Down on the bottom we've got Sia, and Sia has like a scroll above his head, like it's like I'm bringing it into form, I'm visioning it, I'm perceiving what it's going to be. I haven't yet spoken it, but I'm perceiving it. And then this is another way Heka shows himself. The name Heka, I'm going to go back to this one for a second, is the name Heka, He-Ka. Ka, which is the symbol you see above his head, that is one of the 9 bodies that the Egyptians worked with of the soul. And so there's the Ba, which is the soul, the soul that travels, right? It can go out and travel and come back to you. The Ka is the aspect of your soul that's like your astral or etheric double, right? So there's this aspect of you, this eternal aspect that is with you always. And this is what that represents. And so Heka means with Ka, with Ka. So to bring manifestation forward. It's about accessing that ka, that etheric essence of the world to help the magic come through. So I always feel like he's like, good job, high five, high 10. So the next netter who we will meet is perhaps my favorite one of all. I love them all, but Ma'at or Ma'at, some people say Ma'at, some Ma'at, it just depends. She is nothing short of amazing in my mind. She's both pure concept and goddess. She represents truth, order, natural law, justice, harmony, and reciprocity. And I'll point this out later if we have a photo of it. All the gods stand on Ma'at. So one of her symbols, in addition to the ostrich feather and the scales, is the plinth. And it's a particular plinth that's like a rectangle, but it has a slanty side, right? So it's almost like there's a ramp you can walk up and then you stand up on that stage. That's one of her symbols. And many of the gods you'll see are standing on that symbol, right? Because they have to stand on truth. There's no way around. They can't be a God without standing on truth. In a moment, I'll share a little, just a brief overview of Ma'at and the weighing of the hearts, which is a very key ancient belief system of the afterlife, and I believe is a key life system of living. So a few images of her. Uh, there's just something very graceful and present about her, right? Because she's truth. She's this notion that wheat comes from wheat and pigs come from pigs. That's what one of the papyri say, right? Not the other way around. Pigs don't come from wheat. Wheat doesn't come from pigs. And so it's this natural order of the universe. The top photo and the right here, this is Seti, who is one of the pharaohs, and he is holding Ma'at in his hands. And the ancient Egyptians were born into the world from the very get-go with the notion that Ma'at, that they served Ma'at. First and foremost, you serve truth, right? Above and below and around everything else. And when the Pharaoh would take on that role, he would receive Ma'at, he would care for Ma'at, and then he'd return Ma'at. Now, if the Pharaoh wasn't doing that cycle, then the natural laws would break down, civilization would break down, and there would be problems. And well, today, we're not caring for Ma'at so well, regardless of your opinions about the current regime in America. Truth has not been one of his strong points. And so, what happened to that? What happened to that notion of the leader of a people caring for truth in such a precious and sacred way? It's been lost, but I think it can be remembered again. So an image now of this idea of the weighing of the hearts. I'm going to show you two of them. This one comes from a worker's tomb. And you have here the goddess Ma'at. You see her feather. This up here is an image of Thoth in his baboon form, but you also have him over here. We're going to talk about him in a minute. And he's a scribe. He's keeping track of everything that's going on. And on the left side of the scale, you have this little vessel that represents the heart. And it's a clay vessel, and it's called the Ab or Ib. Some say Ib, some say Ab, weighed against the feather of Ma'at. And the idea is that your heart is lighter than the feather, right? And when your heart is lighter than the feather, then you can pass through to the field of reeds, it was called, or paradise, heaven, we would call it today. Up on top here, you have a bunch of figures sitting, and there are 42 of them, not in this image, but there are 42 of them, and they represent the 42 nomes of Egypt. So they're like the minor gods of the counties of Egypt at that time. Let me go to one other photo here just to give a little crisper image of the scene. This particular papyrus is the Papyrus of Ani, and it's one of the more famous of the Egyptian books of the dead and the weighing of the heart. And so in this one, what you can see is the supplicant on the top as well as on the bottom here. First, he comes to the Hall of Two Truths, and he has to declare to each of the 42 assessors a negative confession. I did not steal. I did not. I did not, right? 42 of these to say, I led a moral life. I led a just life. I was a good person. I did my best that I could, right? And so then you get through the hall of two truths, and Anubis takes you and your heart, and he places your heart on the scale. And that scale is weighed, or that heart is weighed against the feather. And you can see here, Ani did pretty good in life, right? His heart is lighter than the feather. And so he's got a ticket now to move forward. And in the next scene, which I don't have right here, but in the next scene, what you would see is Ani, or the supplicant, meeting Osiris and having a conversation with him before moving on to the afterlife. If tragically your heart was heavier than the feather, then this creature here, her name is Amet, and she is a beastie goddess, and she's comprised of three of the fiercest beasts in the ancient times, which is the hippopotamus and the lion and the crocodile. And if you don't weigh, if you don't weigh out, she devours your heart and your soul, and that's kind of it. So this was what they worked with. And I believe today that it's about assessing what are 42 positive declarations for living, right? Not waiting till after I'm gone to go to these assessors and say, I was a good person, but how do I want to live today? How do I want to follow Ma'at today? How does she guide? So Ma'at. Ma'at helps with our direction, helps with our choices, helps lighten our heart, right? Filling our heart with light, having a light heart, both is the same, right? Using that word in both connotations, filling it with light, right? The light of God, and whatever that is for you. But also, light doesn't have any weight. The lighter our heart is, the less it weighs. And I also believe that at any time we can look into our heart vessel and see if it's gathering gunk in there and offer it to Amet instead of waiting till the end and seeing if we weigh out. Let's just give her an offering now and then and say, here's some stuff in my heart that's heavy. Will you devour it for me? And she'll gladly gobble it up, because that's her job, is to eat all that icky stuff. So Amet and the weighing of the heart, and Ma'at's central role in that. She is the scale. She is that which is being weighed against. Were you truthful? So next we're going to go to this fellow who's in this scene right here. His name is Thoth. And the gods and goddesses of ancient Egypt, they, sometimes they're consort here, consort there. These two are together and they had a kid, and then these two are together and had a kid. And I think it has to do with the fact that we're dealing with this huge depth of time that ancient Egypt is, right? So the various layers of time and history and peoples and generations and their own interpretations and their own weavings of the stories and the way these archetypes spoke to them gave us different stories now when we look back through time. So some of the stories say that Thoth and Ma'at were sweeties, right? Because he can't be recording all that is without truth at his side. But then Sachet is also, they have a thing too. So I put them together in this slide. Thoth, his Egyptian name is Jehute, and Thoth is his Greek form of his name. The Greeks also have a god named Mercury, which is him. Mercury and Hermes both represent Thoth in those ways. He's the god of wisdom. He brought forward writing, the hieroglyphs, science, magic, art, judgment, and the dead. He kind of holds all of that. He created the academics, right? And bringing numbers, astrology, writing forward. His name, when it's spelled in the ancient way, means possesses the attributes of ibis. BHW, those three letters together, are the word for ibis in the ancient language. You'll notice that when you see here our letters in the ancient way, there's no vowels. And because the ancients believed that the vowels were sacred and the learning was passed from mouth to ear, right? And so when you're reading the hieroglyphs on the wall, it's only the consonants that are there. The vowel sounds aren't there. So it's only our best guess in any of these names as to whether it's Ib or Ab, whether it's Maet or Me, you know, how we pronounce it is kind of a guess today. So Thoth, his name, Jehute, means possesses the attributes of Ibis. Seshet, she's a goddess of writing and measurement. She's a record keeper. She helps Thoth with that activity. And she's also, when they're making the temples, she's the one who determines the cornerstones, right? Because she's that measure. And okay, this one goes here. Okay, this is here. Okay, no, a little, okay, that's good, right? So she's making sure that those cornerstones are in the right place. And her name means she who is the scribe. Right? So Thoth is the master scribe. He's like the scribe of scribes, but she also has that quality as well. And so with the two of them, in terms of the alchemy of them, Thoth is about, if you don't know and you just need that wisdom, you can lean into Thoth to get insight, to get understanding into things that are confusing, or that you're building into something and you're looking for some deeper understanding of your motives or how to work with it or whatever that is. You can call on him and he can help bring that information to you. And the same with Sachet. If you're a writer, call on her to help you in your writing process, like a muse. Here's just a few, whoops, oh, dinner, I'm sorry. Go back. A few images of Thoth. Here he's measuring. Here on the bottom in the middle is Thoth and Sachet. And you'll notice when you're in the temples, there's so many of these images of almost like Reiki, right? Where they're holding space, holding energy, helping in this way. Sachet has this seven petaled leaf on her head. I'm not quite sure what that is. I think it's some kind of a plant, a leaf of some kind. Maybe even papyrus. And then Thoth, he also is represented by a baboon. It's his other form. And different energy, same guy, different energy. The ibis energy is more contemplative, more measured, right? You think of that ibis waiting for the fish. He's very patient, very still, but quick to act if he has to. Baboon energy is a little more unpredictable. Either way, Thoth has this aspect of air about him, that intellect and air and knowledge and so forth. And here down on the bottom, there's a little photo here of the ibis, what it looked like. The ibis is no longer in Egypt. It fled because of the changes in the river. It doesn't have the right ecosystem for it anymore. So the sacred ibis no longer is in the Nile, unfortunately. But there's prophecy that says when the ibises return that peace will reign. So, inshallah, as they say in Egypt. Check our time. We're doing great. Okay. So the next three I'm going to speak about are Kethra, Re, and Amun. And the three of them have kind of their own attributes in other ways, but I'm talking about them right now as a triad, as a trinity. Kefra is the scarab, and he represents the morning sun, and his name means to become. And so if you think about the dung beetle, how it's pushing its eggs in that ball of poo, right? Not that the sun is that way, but you can imagine that beetle pushing the sun up into the sky, right? And then Ray or Ra, Ray, Ra, again, depending on how you want to say it. I say ray, like the ray of light that comes from the sun. um, Ray is the light, but it's that bright light. It's the full light, the full daylight, right? When it's full noon and the day is just completely bright. And the name actually means mouth, right? So there's this sense of opening, of taking in, of nourishment. And then Amun, sometimes Amin, Amon, um, he represents the unseen. And so he's that nighttime sun, right? So there's the morning sun when it's rising, there's that full day sun when the day is full bright, and then there's the night sun when we don't see it and it's under the belly of the world. So that's the three of them. And Kefra is a protector in terms of the alchemy of how to work with Kefra. And the archetype, he is the protector. He protects, like sort of like you could think of our atmosphere around our planet, like the wings of Kefra holding our earth, right? It's this protective force. In the mummification process, the ancients would put a scarab beetle on the heart, which was the only organ they did not remove from the body. They took the brain and they threw it away because it was just trash. And then they put the lungs and the intestines and the other organs in 4 different canoptic jars, and those got saved. And the heart stayed with the beetle on top of it to protect it, because it was this most sacred of organs in the body. Ra is about that fullness of light, illumination, bringing knowing into a situation, right? And Amun is really helpful to help us go into those dark places, right? To go in and feel comfortable with the unknown, with the unseen. He can allow us to settle into that place. And in this current world, I think so many of us are swimming in that Amun kind of sea right now, that place of the unknown, because we really don't know, right? We don't know how all of this is how it's gonna move forward. So here is, I love these. I don't have one of Amun here. I'm gonna bring him back again at the end, because he is a father figure, and we'll talk about that then. But here we've got Ra shining down in that sun, fullness of day kind of place. And here we have the beetle, right? The rising sun. And the sun gets carried across by the sun barge. So there's this barge, this boat that carries the sun through the heavens. And Ma'at is at the head of that boat. She's guiding the way. And here you see her leading the beginning of the day. Welcome to the day. And the image on the bottom, we've got Kefra pushing the sun up into the heavens, and these 2 goddesses. Can't read with the hieroglyphs, so I can't tell you who they are. Um, Holding space, right? They've got their energy hands up. And then you have these baboons, and there's this part of the myth is that the baboons come out and they ooh, 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 and help the sun up into the sky, right? Ooh, 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 ooh. And so this is what this is showing, the baboons helping that morning Kefra to have the fullness of being and rise, 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 rise. So the next group of Neteru we're going to work with are Ptah, Sekhmet, and Nefertiti. Some of you may have heard of Sekhmet. She's got a lot of energy going on the planet right now. She's got a lot of attention and a lot of people coming into alignment with what she represents. Ptah, her consort, is a creator god, and he creates through the word. He says it, and so it is, right? He says water. Ah, look at that, there's water. And that's his power, right? He created the world from the word. And remember in the beginning we were talking about Sia and Hu. So Sia is like the mind of Ptah, and Hu is the tongue of Ptah, right? And so it's through the force of those 2 that he was able to create. He had the inspiration, the perception, and then the expression, and then Heka put it all together in that manifestation, and so it was. So he didn't act alone, but he did act alone, if that makes sense. So Ptah. And, I couldn't find what his name meant in ancient Egyptian, but it's just that it's almost like he's spitting, right? It's like when you're really excited and you're talking a lot, and then suddenly you're like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. It's almost like that. So his consort is Sekhmet, and this is an image of her here, and she's the lioness. She represents fierce compassion. She's a goddess of war, but also of healing. Her name, Sekhem, means power, raw, pure power, not power over, not power under, just straight power. She's the feminine face of the sun, and or the daughter of Re, she is called as well. The brief story about her is that the people of the planet had forgotten themselves and they weren't taking care. They'd forgotten Ma'at. They'd forgotten justice. They'd forgotten natural order, kind of like today. And Ray's looking down upon this and he's sad because his children aren't taking care of the planet, right? They're not taking care. And so he asks Sekhmet to incarnate on the planet to help them remember. And so she gets down here in her Sekhmet form, lioness form, and she's looking around and she's seeing what the people are doing and seeing how they're not taking care of each other and seeing how they're not taking care of the planet. And she gets pissed, not just a little, but she goes into a rage, a blood rage. Like she is just red with anger. And she starts slaying the people. It's tragic. It's really not a good thing. We're like, come on, Sekhmet, it's a little overboard. Calm down, honey. But she's not, she just can't see right? She's so angry. How could these petulant humans treat creation in such a way, right? So after this epic bloodbath, she falls asleep. And Ray's like, oh dear, this is not what I meant. I love my children. They've lost their way, but we need to help them remember, not kill them. And so he gets together with Thoth, the god of wisdom. What do I do? What do I do? You're wise, you know. And he says, make a brew of these herbs, mandrake, right? Such herbs that will help calm her. Add in pomegranate to make it red like blood. Pour these 7,000 vats of barley red beer around Sekhmet. And when she awakes, she'll find it and she'll lap it up thinking it's blood. Of course she does this. And the stories say that then of course she passed out and so on. What I think is, yeah, maybe she got a little loopy and maybe took a nap and all, but it brought her back into her heart. It helped her remember her compassion. It helped her remember herself, and it helped her remember her purpose, which was to come and help the people remember. And so then rather than slaying, she began to heal. The other important thing about Sekhmet is her role is as a warrior of Ma'at, right? So Ma'at's truth. So she's a warrior for truth. She arrives on the planet and the people are not working with Ma'at. That warrior nature just comes out in the roar, big roar. Um, so she stands for that. And I believe today she's showing up in such a big way because people are being called to task, right? We're being called to be Sekhmet. We're being called to stand up, regardless of our gender, regardless of our religion, regardless of our nationality, stand up for truth. And what does that mean? And how do we hold to that? So Ptah, creator God with the word, Sekhmet, who's this power, this fierce power. When the two of them come together, they create a child, and his name is Nefertem. Nefertem is the lotus. Nefertem represents the enlightened one. The name means beautiful. And I always think about it in this way. It's what makes sense to me. When you have the word, you need this power behind the word. Good power, not like bad, evil, yucky power, but just, good power to be able to bring that word into manifestation. And that manifestation is that blooming lotus. That's that, right? Because enlightenment can be a moment, it can be an expression, it can be a piece of art, it can be a frame of experience that we have. But it's when we bring this expression and this power together, right, that we get Nefertiti. So let me show you a few images of we've got Sekhmet again over here. I love this one because she's got her hands and you see these little lines. It's like you see the energy coming off of her, the power coming off of her. And he is standing on the foundation of Ma'at. Remember I was telling you earlier about that symbol. And so there it is, symbol of Ma'at, right? Standing on truth. He's kind of fixed. He's mummified in a way in his body, but his head, if you saw the full color, would be this very bright, brilliant blue, like the night sky. So his head is is in the sky and his feet are fully grounded in the earth, and he stands solid between the two. And he holds this rod of power that has three different symbols on it. It has the Waz, which is this little critter here, and the Ankh, life, and the Jed, which is like the backbone of Osiris, stability. So, Sekhmet, and here's Nefertem, the lotus. And the lotus was a sacred plant in Egypt, a very sacred plant, and they used it as sacrament. They used it as an enhancer to their experiences. It's not psychotropic the way like a mushroom would be, but it is an enhancer medicine, and very, very sacred and significant. And like the ibis, the lotus does not grow on the Nile anymore. The Egyptian blue lotus. There's an Indonesian blue lotus that you can find in the world, but the Egyptian blue lotus is much more difficult to find. And I found a few people in Egypt that have it, but it's not growing wild anymore because you don't have the flooding and the marshlands where the kind of lotus flowers prefer to live. It doesn't exist anymore. So, what are we doing? We're doing. So the next group that I want to share with you are Amun, Mut, and Kamsu. Now we talked about Amun earlier, and he's the unseen. Um, at some point in that deep time, Amun and Re, they get together and they become one. So it becomes the whole of the sun, right? It's not just the day, the light, and not just the unseen, but that whole of the seen and the unseen, the dark and the light. So Amun Re comes into being. Re still has his form, Amun still has his form, but then suddenly now they're together. And, just like temple on top of temple, I think it also has to do with we adopt from before, right? We bring in what was before into what is now. And so if Amun was the guy, but Ray's got some big attention, suddenly they merge together and all the people love them both, right? And they become one. So the evolution of these gods changes and shifts over time. Mut. Mut is the grandmother. She's represented as a vulture, and her name means mother. She is one of the oldest. There are many that we say, oh, they're the oldest, right? And there's a number of different creation stories that come out of Egypt. So, what is the right story? Who was first? It's a little speculative, but she's one of the oldest of the old, and she, like Thoth, represents wisdom, but in a very different way. Thoth is that kind of intellectual wisdom, the academic wisdom, the let's figure it out and let's, study it kind of wisdom. Mut is the grandmother wisdom, right? She's that knowing because she's lived it, because she's seen it, because she's wiped it up and taken care of it and put it away, right? She's sat with it for so many days and years, so she carries that kind of wisdom. And also that wisdom, like the vulture, to be able to digest the icky stuff, right? The vulture can take in something that's just everyone else would become violently ill from, but they're able to transmute it and find nutrients from it, right? And the other amazing thing about the vulture, which I think is true of grandmothers as well, it's a beautiful mix, is vultures have this ability. I don't know if you come into your mind's eye a vulture that's just soaring, right? They do those circles. And what they're doing is they're catching the uplifts columns of air. There's these columns of air, warm air that rise off the earth, and they catch those columns. And so that what they can do is they don't have to move their wings. They can just flow with so little effort. And so they can leave in the morning and they can jump off their tree or their cliff and just glide all day long with barely a flap of the wing. And so they're able to conserve their energy by just going with this current of air in a beautiful way. So they teach us a lot that way, right? You don't have to make so much effort, right? Don't try so hard. Just allow yourself to be carried. That's what helps us know. And then Amun and Mut together create this god Kansu. Khonsu is a moon god, and this image is Khonsu. He's a baboon. Like Thoth, he shows as baboon. And you see the moon on his head there. His name means traveler, just like the moon is traveling through the night sky. He represents cycles. He represents the cyclical nature of time. He also represents, I think of him like, I haven't read this anywhere. This is my own take on it, but I think of him like homeopathy, right? Like in homeopathic medicine, you take that which is like the thing that you're having. So I've got runny eyes and they're kind of burning. And so I take homeopathic onion because onion makes my eyes burn and run. So he's kind of like that in that he invites it in rather than pushing it away like, oh, I don't like it. It's not comfortable or it's making me whatever, or, oh, push it away. I'm denying this happening. He's like, sit down at the table, set a place for it, feed it well, give it something to drink, give it your attention, allow it to see that you're recognizing it. And then whatever it is that's bugging at you, whether it's an illness or a uncertainty or a confusion or a grief or whatever it is, you meet it and you honor it and you thank it for what it's brought. And then it goes happy. It leaves because you've seen it. So that's some of his medicine. One of the gifts of his medicine. Just call it in, not to call it in to like hold on to it. No, 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 no. Or to give it more energy. That's not the impulse. The intention is to call it in to honor. Because oftentimes these things, once they feel seen and recognized, then they're not trying to get our attention in the same way anymore. So Kamsu. So I hope in this very brief overview that I'm getting, you're seeing these archetypal impulses and ways that they speak to us, right? And the ways that they can help us. And again, this is just a little toe dip into the Nile of all that is. So here we have Khonsu over here on the right in his non-baboon form. Very handsome there, standing all sure and tall. And next to him is Mut. Now, I said earlier that Mut is the form of the vulture. Why is she a lioness? Well, that's an interesting thing because this is Mut, but this is Mut wearing the face of the lioness. So just like these different archetypes work in each of us, they also work through the gods that way. So if you have the energy of Mut, but then you add that fierce compassion onto it, it's a different thing, right? It's grandma being a little fierce. It's grandma saying, and so you'll see that. You'll see, especially with Sekhmet, but she's not the only one, where you're like, oh, that's Sekhmet on the wall. And then you're like, oh, wait, no, the hieroglyph says that it's Isis, right? So it's Isis with Sekhmet's face, or it's this god with this face, or this god with this face. So they too, there's this recognition of that archetypal principle that's running through the Neteru, and that different gods may bring in different aspects of that energy. It doesn't make them the other god, but it brings in that energy. And I love this mood. She is like twice as tall as I am, sitting, she's tall. And then she has this ring of cobras as her crown. So she's just like power, right? Power. Here you see her with her crown on. And then this one above it here, this again, this hieroglyph for house, right? So this is the house of Mut, the house of Mut. Then over here, we've got Amun. I didn't show you much of him earlier when we were talking about the cycle of the sun, but his form is as the ram. So this is a ram head from a Amun Sphinx in Karnak Temple. And then here he is again, and his crown is of this double feather, and he's often shown with the blue skin in this way. So Amun, Mut, and Khonsu. Okay. A few more, and then we're going to have a little journey. And there's so many more than what I'm sharing with you today. And there's so much more that each of these got. We can, you could go into a lifetime of study with any one of these. The next triad that we're going to talk about are Khnum, Satis, and Anuket. The images of Khnum. Khnum is a ram god, and you can see he has these spiraling horns coming out, different than the one you just saw of Amun, right? Khnum, I think of his horns like the DNA spirals. And his story, he's a creator god. I think one of the 5 creator gods that we have in Egypt. And he's the one that creates the form of the human from the mud, right? So remember I was talking about Elephantine Island earlier, the one that has all the layers of time. That's his home. That's their home. The 3 of them are based there on that island. And so I can just imagine him scooping up that clay from that island and throwing it on the wheel, right? And preparing the human form and placing it into the mother's belly. And the mother's then becomes the kiln that cooks that child into being, right? So that's Khnum. He is he helps our form, he helps our bodies. And he's a really good one in that kind of alchemical way, the archetypal way to work on your body. Help, what's going on with this form? You've got aches and pains, things are going on with you. You can go to him and get advice about what's going on. What's going on, Khnum? Why is my knee hurting? Right? Or you can go into meditation with him and call him in to help rebuild you. Like imagine yourself on that potter's wheel and him reforming your whole vessel, right? That's his role. His partner, Satis, and she's the goddess of the floods. She also is a goddess of war and hunting and fertility, but the floods is her main thing. And it's the floods were important, right? We think of floods in today's world and we're like, oh, a flood's not a good thing. But the flood was an essential life-giving aspect of the fertility of the land, right? And so for Satis, if you think about her name, Satis, satisfy. And so she was that goddess that represented enough. There's enough water, not too little, not too much, just right, where the land is satisfied, right? And her name in the ancient language means pourer. She's the one pouring. So as if you're pouring the water out of the jug at the beginning of the Nile, so it's always flowing just right. And then their daughter, Anket, she is the goddess of the cataracts. And so here Satis is making sure the water is flowing, and Anket represents the passageway, right, where that water goes through. And her name means embracer. So it's like the rock. If you remember earlier, maybe I can pop back up there in a minute. They're beautiful rounded rocks that come up out of the water, right? She is those rocks. She's the one that's embracing the flow of the water. um, Whenever I'm in that area, we always do a water ceremony there at the tip of this island to honor the waters. And so, you know, those waters and all the prayers that we've given those waters have now traveled down the Nile and out into the Mediterranean, and you know they're cycling the world at this point. So I think we've only a few times we haven't done a water ceremony there in all my tours. So it's a very potent place, both for the earth itself, right, with this clay, this essence of clay, but also the water, working with the water and the earth. And you'll maybe be hearing how these different elemental aspects are weaving into these different gods. Some of them carry the elementals really strongly. So a few images here. The woman inside of this boat is Anket. She has these feathers on her head. And here is Khnum with his horns. And I don't have a picture of Satis, but I have a picture of her temple. And this is one of the very underneath of all those layers on Elephantine Island. This is the lowest one. The very first time I walked, there's a door. You can't go in here, right? And the door has little bars on it, so you can peek through the bars and you can turn the light on. The guard turned the light on so we could see through the bars. But the first time I walked up to the bars, I had this out of body experience where I suddenly was moved through the door and I was this tiny, tiny little woman. And I'm walking with my bowl of offering up to the altar, and it was water, my offering of water, and I poured it into the bowl that you can see there to leave my offering so that there would be enough, right? Not too much, not too little, but just enough water. And then suddenly I pulled back through. And so ever since that experience, this has been one of those PowerPoints for me where I just feel the depth of time here, the depth of time. So, Ankhet, Kanum, and Seta. And next, Hathor. Hathor is a sky and solar goddess. She represents joy and celebration, sensuality. She's a mother figure. There's a number of archetypal mother figures in the pantheon, and she's one of them, one of the oldest also. She's a nurturer, right? The milk, how the milk nurtures. Her name, Het means house of Horus. Though I think this is one of those great, older woman, younger guy stories, because she'd been around for a long time, and then Horace the younger came into being, and then now they're paired up. So she got the younger man in that. Not always how it is in the world, but Hathor, she's that goddess. So I'm going to just share a few images of her. One of her forms is a cow. Let's see if can you see this? The registration on it isn't super great. Let me bring it to the front. But here she is. She's the cow. She's quite lovely, and she has the horns on her head. The solar disc is often represented with her as well. Here, remember again the hieroglyph for house. And here's Horus in the house. So this is the hieroglyph for her name, House of Horus. So if you see this hieroglyph, you know it's her name, right? And she's just lovely. She's just when you in her presence, there's just this like, oh, right? You just want to like have fun. Just want to have fun. This image over here is in her temple in Dendera, and you can see the beautiful columns with her image on the top of each of the columns. And this is an astrological temple. On the ceilings, it's showing the movement of the sun and the moon, as well as all the zodiac signs. It's really one of the most beautiful temples in all of Egypt. Um, really quite phenomenal. So, Hathor, celebration, right? She's a good one to call in if you're feeling a little low, if you're feeling a little lonely, or if you're feeling like just been in the doldrums for a while. Come on, Hathor, and see how you can bring some more joy and celebration into your life. So, yeah. And then the last grouping that we're going to really briefly touch on, because they are very complicated, is Osiris, Set, Isis, Nephthys, Heru, and family. So the big family, quite complicated, slightly dysfunctional. They've had an interesting run of it. The image that we're looking at in this slide is Isis. You know, it's her. She has a throne, is her symbol on her head. It's almost like, and she is the mother. She's like the archetypal mother. And you imagine if the infant is on the mother's lap, the mother is the throne for the child, right? And she is the throne. And so when the pharaoh is sitting on the throne, he's sitting in the lap of the mother, right? He's not sitting on the father, he's sitting on the lap of the mother. And it's that mother that holds the pharaoh. You'll notice here Osiris is standing on truth, right? He's standing on the foundation of truth. He can't be who he is without that. So I'm just going to really quickly go down who these folk are and what they represent, and then show you a little image of their family tree. So Amun, we spoke about him earlier. He was like the great grandfather, and out of his ejaculation, of his own self, Shu and Tefnut came into being. Shu is air, Tefnut is moisture. Okay, Shu has an image of a feather, like Ma'at, same feather, but male form, not female. And Tefnut is shown as a lioness form. So sometimes when you see the lioness, you're like, oh, Sekhmet. No, Tefnut. And the two of them then brought to being Nut and Geb. Nut is the starry sky, the Milky Way, the heavens above. Geb is the earth father. So whereas in most of the earth, it is the earth mother, in the ancient Egyptian, it was earth father and sky mother. So the two of them, and there's a big story about this. I'm not going to go into their story, but I encourage you to look into their mythos if it intrigues you. Um, earth and sky get together, and they have 5 children: Osiris, Set, Isis, Nephthys, and Horus the Elder. Osiris was born out of the belly of the sky mother, and he was put down onto the earth in the Delta lands. And where he stepped, green grew, right? He was the agriculturalist. He was the one that he knew how to plant the seed and tend the seed and take care of the seed and harvest the seed, that whole cycle, right? And he was paired with Isis. So the two of them were given the Delta. And Set, he was put out in the deserts and he had to hunt and look for whatever food he could find. Whatever wild lettuce was out there, he ate it all, and he ate the seed too. So he didn't have anything to replant. Um, so it was hard life. And he kind of represents the hunter gatherer man. And he was paired with Nephthys. She and Isis are twin sisters. Isis is like the one that's out in the world, the mother, the teacher, right? The nurturer. How can I help you? She's the midwife, the weaver, all of these things, and the community builder. And Nephthys is private and a little shy and withdrawn, and but still in touch with all of the deep, dark mysteries, not dark as in negative, but just as an unseen. And then Horus the Elder, he is the, I wrote uncarnated, my little squiggly red line there, because I know it's not a word, but he's uncarnated, meaning he never incarnated onto the planet, right? He stayed up in the sky with his mother in the sky. So there's a whole story about this, but Set was barren, right? No lettuce seed. He had no seed. He couldn't make children. And there's a story about Nephthys and Osiris having a little thing. And out of their little thing came the child Anubis, who then is cared for by Isis. So Anubis is raised by his aunt and his own father. And then Isis also had a child of her own named Horus, Horus the Younger. And this is the Horus that became known, all the pharaohs were known as Horus. And he's the story of the hero in a way, the petulant youth that goes through his trials and tribulations, but through all of that, he comes out the other side with a greater sense of self and country and all of that. And so this idea of the hawk, he's represented by the hawk, and he helps us see, right? Because the hawk, it can see so far and so wide from way up high, but it also can see that individual blade of grass. And so he helps us in that way, right? That when we bring Horus into our life to look at our life, he can help us see the breadth and depth of our life, but he can also help us look into those little details, all the particulars. So family, big family, and here's their family tree. So we've got Amun, and then we've got Tefnut and Shu over here, and then we've got Newt and Geb, who then have these 5, and then the 2 children. Horus actually also has 4 children, and his 4 children are the 4 deities that are represented by the canoptic jars. And I don't know, their names are very long and hard to say, and I haven't memorized them. I apologize to them and you for that. But know that the family continues to them, that there are those 4. So the family tree. Little dysfunctional, a little bit of like jealousy. Set kills his brother, right? It's kind of a big deal. Horus represents in some ways the first immaculately conceived birth, right? Because Osiris gets raised from the dead and Isis is impregnated, and hence Horus comes to be. So very interesting story. And all of these Neteru can help us, even Set, help us with our obstacles. help us when things aren't going our way, right? Knowing that sometimes we get tripped up because we need to stop and pause and pull back for a minute, reassess, and then move forward again. So this is the Ennead, they are called, the gods of the Ennead. All right. Let's all take a deep breath together and arrive into now. Thank you for listening to that stream of bits and pieces. And the last bit of time we have together, I want to take you on a little guided journey to meet some of them in your own inner space. And before we go on the journey, I want to share a few photos just to kind of give you a pathway of what I'll be calling forth in the journey. We're going to be, going down the deck of the rampart. Um, and it's morning. The sun is just starting to come up, right? You're going to be on the river for a moment. And then you're going to be taken to a place where they're getting the hot air balloons ready. Right? As we've spoken today, we touched it in the beginning about modern Egypt, and then we've just spent the other part about ancient Egypt. And so we're going to use this modern piece of Egypt, these balloons that they fly along the West Bank, to be what carries us in this journey, right? So we'll arrive, they're getting it ready, and then it starts to rise with the sun. We notice ourselves along the cliffs of the West Bank. We notice the breadth of Egypt. We begin to see this strip of green, right? And on the left side of this image, what you don't see is the Nile, right? So the sand and this little bit of green and the water. And then we're going to fly to a temple. And when we first get there, we're going to notice what it is today, right? How it is today. This temple is Habu Temple. And maybe you'll be taken to Habu, but just notice what temple you get taken to, right? Maybe another one for you. And so as you begin to descend down to this temple, something's going to happen. There's going to be a shift. And you're going to go from seeing it as it is now in this colorless, cared for, but dilapidated kind of state into how it was once long ago. Right? And when you arrive into that place, then we'll be inviting in the Neteru to come and meet with you and see what they have to share. See who shows up, right? Of all of them that you've just met today, or any of the Neteru who you work with in your life beyond this moment, just pay attention to who shows up. And maybe it's someone you don't even recognize. Maybe it's someone showing up, a Neteru showing up who we haven't spoken to and spoken of, but they're there all the same. And just make note of what they look like, make note if there's some symbol associated with them, and receive what they have to share. So with that, why don't we all just take a deep breath into our heart center and allow yourself to settle into your seat, into your body. Opening to the mysteries of Egypt, however they're wanting to speak with you today. Filling your heart with gratitude for the opportunity to interact with the Neteru. So bring yourself in your mind's eye, however you perceive information, whether it's visually or just in a knowing or a sense or a feeling, however it is for you. Bring your attention and your body to be standing on the bank of the Nile. It's early morning, there's still some stars out, but you know the sun is coming. And just a little way down the Nile, you see the boat ramp where a boat is waiting to carry you from the east bank to the west bank. Allow your feet to follow their way down the boat ramp on to the motorboat, where the man starts the engine and the growl of the motor begins to push the boat out into this ancient river, moving you across its flow towards the west bank. As you move across the water, notice the way the light that is there this morning is playing upon the surface. Notice the way it feels to have this ancient river under you. Soon you arrive to the west bank and you leave the boat behind. And just a little ways down the road, following your feet, you arrive at a place where they are filling the giant balloons with fire and air to help them rise from the land. Your balloon is ready, and the large basket that will carry you is welcoming. Step into your basket. Gratitude to the one who will be guiding this balloon up into the air. Notice how gently and easily the balloon and the basket begins to lift off the ground, lift up into the air, higher and higher. And as you go up higher, you notice the sun is rising with you, bringing this new day. You see your shadow on the cliffs as the balloon is carried on the wind towards the temple that you are being called to. Feel the flow of the air around you. Hear the growl of the fire as it fills the space in the balloon. In what seems like a very long time and no time at all, you notice below you a temple built of stone. It's the same color as the desert itself, worn with time and age. And you know that this temple holds the netter that has a message just for you. And so notice that the balloon begins to sink down gently and easily towards the earth. Notice as the balloon is sinking towards the earth and you bring your attention to the temple, that it begins to shift and change the closer you get to the earth. It shifts and changes, bringing color, bringing newness, bringing activity as it was once long, long ago. Your balloon lands, And you step out and follow your steps into the temple, into the very center point of this holy place, the Holy of Holies. When you arrive there, there's somebody waiting for you. One of the netter was here as a guide, as a friend, who is here to welcome you into this family of the Neteru. Take this moment to notice them, to give them your attention. Notice how they feel or how they look or how you know them to be. And ask what wisdom they have for you at this time. What is it that you need to know? Whether it's a symbol or words, image, feeling, just notice and receive. Now take a deep breath into your heart center, bringing in this knowledge, knowing that this netter is here for you and accessible by you at any time. And so this isn't the end of the conversation, but the beginning. Thank this netter from the bottom and the top and the sides and all around of your heart. And if you have any requests of this netter, this is the time for that request. With the knowledge that you can come back here at any time. Know that now is the time to leave the temple. Gratitude in your heart. The new piece of wisdom that you're carrying. Perhaps this wisdom is clear and understood. Maybe it's a little confusing. Sometimes they give us riddles that we get to work with as we move through our days and weeks ahead. So just notice how it is for you. Bring yourself back to your balloon, and the balloon begins to rise into the sky, carrying you back towards the river. And you notice as you go higher and higher into the sky that the temple below begins to morph back into this old, old temple. The colors no longer evident. Carry with you the gratitude as the balloon brings you back down to the earth by the river, where your boat is waiting. And the boat carries you back across that sacred water, back to the green bank of the Nile, back into your body, into your room, into your presence on this day, November 25th. Take a deep breath, anchoring yourself, grounding yourself, bringing yourself into full presence, wiggling your toes, wiggling your fingers. And when you're ready, open your eyes and come back to us. Thank you all for joining me today. It's such an honor to share Egypt in these times when I can't be over there to share this piece of inner Egypt with you. It's just such a gift. So I hope this little bit made you curious and interested in more of what Egypt has to offer. And thank you. I'm super grateful. I encourage you to write down, if you're a writer, record down what you've written or what you've experienced in the journey, what the wisdom is. I don't have a lot. I can stay a little longer, but I also want to honor the container of time that is. And we were meant to be done 4 minutes ago. So if you need to go, please go. And I saw, Pat, that you have a question. I saw your hand come up. No? Okay, you're good. Great. So if you have questions, I can stay for a minute, but we've come to our conclusion. And you can also reach out to me and ask questions afterwards if you are curious about any of this. So many blessings to each of you. And may all the Thanksgiving blessings be surrounding you and your families. If you can be together, that beautiful gift. And if not, just love for you and all yours. Be well, everybody.